Okay. So we discussed this is the outline of my talk for the classes in Python. So first we will discuss what are the classes in Python. Then we discuss the init method, instance method, class variables, regular methods, class methods, static methods, and inheritance. So this is the outline of my talk. So the first thing comes that what are the classes and why we use them. So the classes are used in most programming languages. Classes are used to logically group the data functions so that we can reuse them. So that classes are used are defined to reuse the data so that we can make a function or group of functions once, and then we can use those functions for many times. For the classes, we call data is called as an attribute, and the functions are called as a method. In particular, for dealing with this Python or dealing with the Python, we can say that whenever we will talk about the data or the variable, we will say that it's the attribute, and whenever we will be talking about the functions in the classes, we will be call them as a methods. This is the you can say that the norm that this is the people who usually call the data as a attribute and functions as a method in Python. Method is a function associated with a class. This function is a little different from the other function because this function is particularly associated with some class. So now I am going to introduce the basic syntax of the class and how we define the classes here. They are abstract data types and multiple kinds of data can be put in it. Yes, I just says that classes, we use the classes because they are abstract data types and multiple kinds of data can be put into it. Yes, it's very good definition, and here we will see that how this definition can be more vivid, more understandable. So we define a class in Python, and we make this class as an empty class. We don't say anything. We do not associate any attribute or the method to this class. We just pass it, and then we create an object of the class employee one. We are creating the class of employees, and we have created an object of the class employee one, and the second object of the class is employee two, and just we print them. And here we are going to associate some properties of the employee. If you have the employee in some company, there will be the first name of the employee and there will be the second name of the employee, Corey, Sheffer, and then associated will be the email of the employee, and there will be the last thing here we discuss is the pay of the employee. So these are the four variables which are associated with the first instance of a class. This is called the first instance of a class, and here it is the second instance of a class. For a second instance or a second employee of a class, there will be the same. The pay of the first name of the second employee or second instance, the first last name of the second employee or the instance, email of the second employee or the instance, and the pay of the second employee or the instance. And then anything that we want, then we can print that. For the employee one, we are going to print the email of the employee one, or email of the instance one, or email of the instance two. So the number of employees here, or the number of things that are associated with that class, they are called as an instance of a class. So here we declare the two instances of the class for this employee class. If we have 10 employees, and we can start from employee 1 to employee 10, then we will say that we have 10 instances for this class. So this is the rough idea that classes are used to logically put the data together. Just like the employee 1, we have some identities, and the employee 2, we have the identities as well, and we are going to put them and put into the class. So this is the basic understanding of the class, that why we use the class. Then the things, they have the same logical order or logical understanding, we can connect them. Aim of the past statement. Past statement is used just to ignore something, just to do nothing. But and the next in the next slide, we will see that instead of this past, we will use some functions, or we will use some methods or functions associated with the class. So for this is the basic understanding of the class. So I did not include any attribute in the class or the method in the class. But in the later examples, I will include the methods and the attributes in the class. Or you can say that some functions associated with the class and some variables associated with the class. So for this case, I don't associate anything with the class. I just give an overview why the classes are used and how the classes are used to logically put the data together. And this is the basic of the code. And as you know, the people who took the last lecture, I discussed that I implemented these codes into the Jupyter notebook. So, and this is the Jupyter notebook implementation of this code. Declaring the class, initializing the class, and here I have declared, I have created the two objects or two instances of the class. Instance 1 of the class employee, instance 2 of the class employee. Then I print them, and you can see that these two instances are unique. They are these two the instances or the employee IDs are the unique or the employee or the class objects are unique, and they are put on some address in the memory, and these addresses are also unique to those objects. And then we have just similarly here on the left side, we have made the associations for the employee 1, and the associations and the specifications or attributes for the employee 2. So there will be different. Here we are calling them instance variable. There will be the instance variable and the class variable. We are calling them first name, last name, email and pay as instance variable. Why we call them instance variable? Because they are associated towards the instances, towards the employees, and that's why we are calling them instances in the instance variable. In the next slides, we will show that there are the class variable. Declaring the instance variable, and then we are going to print any of the thing that you want to print. You can print the email, or you can print the pay, or you print the first name, last name, or whatever you want. Then it can print it for you. Did you got that? This is the basic understanding. What the ISA says that this is the logically put the data together. So we are through these classes we are going to put the data to logically to put the data together using the classes. This is the basic understanding of the class. So is that okay? Okay, Jibil says okay. So now I am going towards one step more, and now I am going to answer for the past, because you can see that this method is very uh, a little lengthy, because if we have the 10 implies or if we have the 100 implies, then we have to do all this repetition for the 10 times or the 100 times, and it's not seems logical that we do this process for 10 times or 100 times or 50 times. We are going to look towards some more sophisticated method to put the data together, to logically put the data, and to put that um, to put the data more in an efficient way. We are going to include the init method or init functions. As I say, in C++ or MATLAB, you call them as a functions. But here, the functions in the classes, we are calling them methods. Functions associated with the classes, we are calling them methods. So here I am using the same class as a same class, declaring the class, and now I am going to define a function, and that function I call them as an init function or initialization function. So the first argument of this function is the self. The first argument of the function is the self. The self is the keyword here, or you can say that every time first the self is the instance, the number of employees. You can say for the generic as a self. If we have 10, we have 1, we have 10, we have 100 employees, we can just put self here. And it will be the first variable of this init method will be the instance of the, it will be just specified for the instance, and for specifying for the instance we call them as a self. Then the second argument is the first name, third is the last, and the next is the pay. So you can say that by default we have to put the self when we are going to use the init method, initialization method. So then we put the first name towards the first dot self, and last name of the employee towards the self dot last, and pay towards the self dot pay. And if we are going to make the email, then we make them first name plus dot last, and then comma accompany at the name. So this now we have declared the class and a method in the class. And we last time we just put a pass, that we don't put any method or attribute in the class, but this time we are going to put the method in a class, so that every time we should not give the name of the we should not give the first name, last name, and pay to each employee. Here what we are going to do is that we just make the we just make an object of the class, and in the class argument we are giving we are giving the arguments, the first name, last name, and the pay of the employee. So when this function will be called, this class will be called, it will be go towards the class employee, and then the core will go towards the first, and Schaeffer will go towards the last, and the 50,000 it will go towards the pay. And all this instance, all this is one instance, employee one, it will go towards the self. So what it will do, it will, Core will be assigned to the first name, Schaeffer will be the last name of the class, and 50,000 towards the pay. And then it will be make the email address of the of the first instance. Similarly, for the second instance, for the second employee, it will call the class, and for the class, it will put it will associate the first name of the class, first name, second name, and pay for the instance of a class. This is here is we call the instantiation of a class. That we are using the class to make the instances. This imply one is the first instance, imply two is the second instance. You can put them the imply third imply, fourth imply, up to 10, 100, or 50, or whatever you want. And now you can see that this time this organization of the code is more logical, more appealing as compared to the last one. And if you want to print the email, first name, second name, or pay of any of the employee, you can just simply say that the print imply one email, print imply two email, or print imply 10 email, print imply 10 first name, last name, or whatever you want. You can easily print that. And after that, if you want to print you want to combine the name of the first name and the last name, this last line, this prints the first name and the last name. You can print the for the instance one, imply one, you want to print the first name and last name together. The last command can print the first name and last name together for any of the instance. For instance one, instance two, instance 5, instance 10, whatever the instance, it can print the first name or last name. So this is the way that we can logically group the data using the class and the class instance and a method of a class, init method. Using the init method of a class, we have organized the data of the implies first name, last name, email address, and pay in a logical order. And the same code I have implemented here in the Jupyter notebook, and I have taken the screenshot for this, and you can see that the same code is over here. The init method, instance, the first instance of the class, second instance of the class, printing any of the attribute. This is called the attribute or the instance variable that you want to print. I want to print the instance variable email. Maybe you want to check the pay of the first employee or the pay of the second employee. You can do it. So what is the self? Self, you can say that self is the keyword. Instead of instance, every time you have to put the first as a, when you are going to declare the init method, when you are going to use the init method, then the first argument you have to put the self. For the init, whenever you use the init method, you have to use the self as the first argument, and whatever after you, it's, and self mean here that you are, this init is initialization, and this initialization is for instance, for some instance. So that's by default, or you can say that that is a keyword. You have to put the self here for whenever you are going to use the init method or init function. Is that okay? So first, last, an email is appearing, but why salary pay doesn't appear in output function? Dear output function, the salary is not appearing because I did not use the I did not I did not put the pay at the output. So for the print, here for the print, Jamil, answering to the Jamil, you can say that employee underscore one dot pay, then it will print the pay of the first employee. If I want to check the pay of the second employee, then I need to print the print employee two. Instead of email, I will just put the pay. So it will print out the pay of the second employee. Is that okay, Jamil? Okay, okay. So Usman says we can't use the other word. I guess so. Maybe I heard that we can use that, but most of the people or the general practice is that people use the self for initialize for the init method. Whenever we use the init method, we use the self as the first argument. I guess you can, but I am not pretty sure about that. Okay, Usman, should I move ahead? Okay. Okay, Ming Bai, Ji Ming Bai. So this is the same example, and here we are going to use the one more method. Uh, Before we use this is about the regular methods. So before we use only one init method here, or one init method in this class imply. But now we are going to use one more method, and this method is to print the full name of the employee, to print the full name of the employee. So instead, I use this function, or I use this method, and this method it takes, and for the full name of the instance, it is just taking the instance. So for this full name, you can say that this is the same employee one, object one, or the instance one of the employee, instance two of the class employee. Then I print the email. This is the email. Now I am going to use the one more. I want to print out the full name of the employee. So instead of, if you go here I am using the full name of the employee. This statement also prints the full name of the employee, but this is out of the class. It's not in the class. Here I have declared that the full name of the class. I have declared the full name of the class as a function. This is the same line, but now this line is for the this line is under the full name function or the full name method. So that if you want to print the full name for any of the employee, you can simply call that function, or you can simply call this method, and it will print out the full name of that instance. If you want to print the full name of the first instance, it will be print out Corey Schaeffer, and if you want to print out the full name of the second instance or second object, it will print out the test user, because this is the second user. If you have the 50 instances, if you want to print the full name of the 40th instance, then you will put the print employee 40 under dot full name, and it will print out the full name of of the 40th employee. Now you can see that in the class employee, first we have used the init method, that is for the initialization of or instantiation for the of the objects. And then we have a other method. This is the init method. This is some other method that we may need. We need the complete name of the employees. Then we have used this method. And uh, for this self, it will complete. It will take all the things of the of the instance. It will take the first name and the last name and the pay. All the things are here in this function, in this method. So we can simply use the first name and the last name, and we can join them together, and it can only print that the full name of the of any of the instance. So this is called the the init method. And other than the init method, which takes self as the first argument, or instance as the first argument, they are called as irregular methods. This is the regular method. This is the instance method. This is the init method. This is the regular method. Regular method are based on our need. We need that we want to combine the names of two of the employees. First, we want to combine the first name of the employee and the second name of the employee. So we have made a function full name. It depends upon our need, that if we want to combine the first, it depends on the need. If whatever we want, we can whatever we want to do, we make a function for that, and we call that function, or we can call that method. We can make a method, and we call that function or method as a regular method. Is that okay? Can you differentiate between the init method and the regular method? Init method takes the instance as a first argument, and the other some other parameters. And for the regular method, it depends upon our needs, whatever we want, what extra we want to make in the class, what the class what functions or methods the class should perform. We associate them with the full name or some other methods, regular methods. Is that okay? So here is the other example, and here I guess I am going to wait a minute. Yes. So it's the method, two ways to call the regular methods. Here I am going to call the regular method. So this is the one way to call the regular method. This is the same code I have used before. This is exactly the same code which I have used in the last slide. But here I am going use the regular method within instance. I am going to use the regular method for an instance. For example, I want the full name of the first employee. So I print the full name of the first employee. And here, this is the other way to print to use the regular method. Here I use the class name and the method name, and then I put the object of the class. This imply one is the first object or the first instance of a class. Here I have already declared that this imply one is an instance of a class. So because imply one is an instance of a class, so it is automatically called the employee, and then it from the employee class it will call the full name, which is this one, full name. And this is the other method. I am using the keyword, the name of the class, and then the method, this method, and then I am going to use the object of the class, for which object I want to call this method. For I want to call this method for object 1, for object 2, whatever I want to use. So this is the two methods, whatever you want. It depends. It gives us some flexibility to use the language. So the next is the class variables. Before we discuss the init method and the regular method, now we are going to use the init function or regular function. Now we are going to using the variables or attributes. So this is the class variable. This is the same code that I have used before. But here I am going to make a little bit change. I am going to give the raise or increase to the employees, and 4% increase to the employees salary. So I have made a function for that. Here is another regular method. This is the second regular method, and this second regular method, it's going to give the raise or increase to the salary of the people, to the salary of the employees. So this is the first object of the class. This is first object, and this is the second object, test user. This is the second object of the class with the salary. And we decided that we are going to give the increase to the salary of the people, and we are going to make a flat increase of the 4%. So I declare a variable, class variable, that is the raise amount 1.04 or 4%. And I am going to use this class variable into the class method, or into the class function, into the class method. And how it is going to use self and self.pay, because already pay is already, we are going to use this self.pay. Self.pay is this one, the self.pay. And I am going to self.pay, I am going to multiply with the raise amount. So self.raise amount, so it will be multiplied, and it will give the increase in the salary. So if I am going to use, I am going to check that how much is the salary of the first employee, and how, if I apply the raise on the salary of the first employee, how much the increase will, how much the salary will be increased. So first I am going to use the employee one dot pay. This I am going to use now. This is the instance variable, because employee one is an instance or object of a class, and pay is its attribute or instance or its variable. So it's called the instance variable. So through the class, through this class, I am going to use the for the first instance, I am going to use the pay, the instance variable pay. And then for this first instance, I am going to call the function, the class method, the class function. I'm going to call the class function. So I am applied raise. So it will take the salary of the first employee, and it will multiply 1.04, and it will return that value. And if I for the employee one, and now after the increase, it's going to print out the increase of the first instance. How much is the increase of the first instance? So before the increase, before the raise, the salary was 50,000, and after the raise, the salary has with an increase of 4%, it has increased to 52,000. So this is an example that we are going to use. We are going to access the class variable. We are going to access the class method, apply raise, and also we are going to use the class variable raise amount, which is 4% in this case. So this is the way that if we have a data set, if we have a database of 100 employees, and we want to check that how much the salary of the employee number 70 will be increased, then we can simply put the employee underscore 70 for dot pay for the initial employee, for the initial salary, and then we can apply the raise, and we can finally check how much the salary of the 70th employee has increased for a raise of 1.04%, for a raise of 4%. So this is the way that it has make to access or understand the database or the data in a more efficient way, but by logically grouping that data. So is that understandable? Is that okay? Does it seem sensible? That why we use the classes, and how the classes are used to organize our data, to logically group our data? So okay, then this is a little next step. Now we are going to change or modify the class variable. This above code is the same, and this above code is okay. I just go through this code. This is the same code with an increase of 0.4%. I have question from Seth. We have declared the variable raise amount outside the definition in it. However, at the time of calling, we are using the self. But this raise amount variable is inside the class. So this class variable is accessible all inside the class. And for the apply raise, because the apply raise, we are going to make, we are going to apply raise on some instance. So that's why we are going to use the self dot raise amount. We are not, if we use this statement outside the class, then every time we have to put the employee one dot raise amount. If you can come here, Seth, can you wait a minute? Okay, I think I have not put that. If this self means that if the instance one come here, then it apply the raise amount for that instance. If the instance two comes here, then it applies the raise amount for the salary of the second instance. And if here the object or the instance 10 come here, it will apply the raise amount for that instance. Here it says that pay of what? Pay of self means the pay of instance. Raise amount on what? Raise amount for what? Raise amount for the instance. Raise amount for the instance. That's why we put the self in it. Is that clear, Seth? Your question is why we use the self here in the raise amount self dot pay in it int self dot pay multiply self dot raise this line. Is that okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Seth says okay. Okay. So that's, thank you, Seth. So now in the next slide, we are going to modify the class variable. To modify the class this is the class variable. This is the same code here. And now I am going to print the class variable. What is the value of the class variable? So I just use the class name and then raise amount. This is the class name employee, and then I use the variable raise amount, and I check that it shows 1.04. And I check that for the employee one, how much is the raise amount? For the employee one, the raise amount is also 1.04. For the employee two, the raise amount is again 1.04. But what if we want to change the raise amount? If we want to change the raise amount from 4% to 5%, then we can change the class variable outside of the class. So here first I am going to access the class, and then I am going to change it. Employee dot raise amount is equal to 1.0405, changing it from 4% to 5%, and then I am going to print that for the employee one, for the employee two, or for the employee one, for the employee two, or for the whole class. So it means that using the class, if we want to change the class variable, if we want to modify the class variable, we can modify the class variable. For instance, originally the class has made that you should make a salary increase of 4%, but you say that some employees, or for some reason you want to make the increase from 4% to 5%. You can access that raise amount or raise factor, and then you can set it as per your requirement, as per your need. So here we have, originally the raise amount was given, salary raise was 4%, but then we decided to make it 5%, and here we have just made it 4% to 5%, and I did not change anything in the class. We have just played the thing outside of the class. So this is the big thing, that we need not to change anything inside the class. Just we have accessed some variable outside the class. So here is the same. We have declared one other class variable, and this name of this class variable is the number of employees. So how much are the number of employees? So originally the number of employees are 0. Whenever this init function, or whenever this init function will be called, it will be the number of employees will be incremented by 1. So you can see that this is the first time we are going to put the first instance or first employee or first object in the class. So after this, the variable will be 1, and then we are going to put the second employee in the class, and after this, the variable the number of employees, it will be changed to 2. So before adding the employees, or before instantiating the employees, before instantiating the class, the number of employee was 0, which print out as 0. And then we called the class, or we instantiated the class 2 times. We put the 2 employees in the class, then it has changed to, number of employees has changed to 2. And if we have the 100 employees, then employee 1 to employee 100. And if then we print this command, print employee 1, number of employees, it will show the 100. It just increment every time this init function is used. You can see that here in this code, we are only using this init method. Init, no other method is being used in this code. We are just using the init method to make to instantiate or make the objects of the class. We are just going to put the 2 employees in the class as a database. We can say that we have this employee class is a database, and we are going to put the number of employees, and this time we have put only 2 employees in the class. Is that okay? This one shows, it will show number of employees. Yeah, it will show the number of employees because the class has been called 2 times. Class employee has called first time, and this is the second time, so there are only 2 employees in the class. So then comes the class methods. So class methods, why we use the class methods? Class methods is a method which is bound to the class, not the objects of the class. It can modify a class variable that will be applicable to all the instances. So if we want to make a method that will be applicable to all the elements of all the instances of a class, then we declare it as a class method. Then we declare it as a class method. So for example, here we want to make the increase from 4% to 5%. We are going to make the increase from 4% to 5% inside the class. Then we are going to we are going to this code is to modify the raise as our need. So we are going to make we are going to use this class method for our case. So this is the same employee, this is the init method, this is the regular method, this is again the regular method. Here we are going to use the class method. So for the class method, we have to use the @class method as a keyword. We have to use the keyword as a class method here. And for that, and then we have to define the function set raise amount. Set raise amount, that how much we want to. Actually, in this function, we are going to give a factor of increase in pay. We are going to set a factor of increase in pay, and for this method or this function, for this class function or class method, next time I will only use the method, the word method. This class method, the first instance is the class, whole class CLS class is the first instance, and the second instance is amount. Whatever the operation that we want to make, it will make that function on all of the class. On all of the class, this class method apply that function or process or make that change to all of the class. So this is the way it is called as a class method. So these methods are different. For the init method, you can see the first instance is the init, and then we decide the other then we set the other attributes or other arguments. And for the regular method, we just put the self, and for the class method, we set the CLS as an argument, and other whatever we want to change another argument if we required. And in this case, we required another argument which is amount, so we use that argument here. So here it's using the set raise amount CLS class comma amount, and then we are going to apply the amount on the class raise amount on this is the class raise amount. We are going to change this variable, this class raise amount. We are going to change this class raise amount using the class method. Wait a minute, I am going to make you understand what's going to happen in this code. So this is the same we are using. We are going to instantiate, or we are going to make object of the class for the employee one, for the employee two, and now we are going to just check that how much is this variable raise amount. What's the raise factor? So I am going to print the raise factor for the whole class, raise factor for the employee one, and raise factor for the employee two. And you can see that for class, for employee one and employee two, the raise factor is 1.04 or 4%. Then the company decided that they want to make this raise factor to 5%. So how we can do that using the class method? So we can do that by using this argument 5%, 1.05. So and employee dot set raise amount, employee dot set raise amount. So set raise amount is a class method. So this is the default argument. We need not to give this CLS, but here we only need to we only need to put the other argument, and the other argument is 1.04. If we don't put any argument here, then it will generate the error, and it will say that you must need to put the one argument, because one argument is mandatory. It should be given. So after this, we have globally changed this class variable from 4% to 5%. And if we want to check that whether this change has made to all the class or all the variable or all the instances of the class, so we can see that we are going to print all these things, the for raise amount for the whole class, raise amount for the instance one, raise amount for the instance two. Here you can easily see that this raise is from 4% to 5% it has made. But what we have just need to do, we call the class method this set raise amount and put it 4% to 5%. It has changed all of the all of the employees salary from 4% to 5%. So this is the beauty of the class methods, that you not need to change some variable uh, by one, or for some instance or for something you can change it. You can access the class variable globally using the class method and apply it to all instance to all of the class. So this is the three things: the init methods for the initialization of classes, and then some regular methods that they are according to our need, and there are the class methods to make some change in all of the class, modify a class variable that will applicable to all of the instances. Then we use the class methods for this. I hope you will be there will be something good for you. Let wait a minute. Let me see the chat box. Alt H. Yeah, hello guys. Can you see these things? Hello. Kindly give me your feedback on the chat box. Okay. So okay. So then I am going to move the next slide. Okay. So here I have discussed this slide, and then I am going to go to the next slide. So next slide is also the set trace amount, but here I am going to, this is the same thing, but here outside I am going to say that I am, if I give the instances like this, the first name, so last name, uh, and the salary, which are separated by hyphen. First name, last name, salary. First name, last name, salary. First name, last name, and salary. And then I am going to make a, I am going to use the function, split function. By the way, I am doing all this thing outside of the class. I am doing all these things outside of the class. And I am going to split all these instances using the hyphen or the hyphen because they are separated by the hyphen. So the John will come to the first, and Doe will come to the last, and the pay will come to the pay. 70,000 will come to the pay. For the second instance, what will happen? Steve will come to the first, Smith will come to the last, and the 30,000 will come to the pay. And likewise for the third instance, Jane will come to the first, Joe will come to the last, and 90,000 will come to the pay. And for the employee one, I can say that for the employee one, first, last, and pay. Just before I was using the Tasveer Ahmad and 50,000 test user, first test user 60,000. Instead of that, here I can use this built-in function for the Python, and I am going to print the email of the new employee and the email of the second employee. So this is the way that I can do it. But if my employees, if my instances are like this, and there are hundred of instances, then I need to call this function. I need to call these two lines for 100 times. What about if I could make these two lines inside the class, so that it will be easy for me to use for the hundreds of times, or 50 times or more. So I am going to do that. So here I am going to going to split the instances over the hyphen, but now this time I am going to split inside a class, inside the class method. I am going to use a method for I am going to use a method or function which can split the instances over the hyphen like this. So it's the same just we used before, but what's the difference? Now I am going to use it under the umbrella of the class. Now I am going to use it under the umbrella of the class. So it's the class method. From the string, I name it the function or the method. For this method, I name it from string to take the implies, to take the instances from the string. So this is the CLS for the whole class. Do this thing, and empty string, employee string. So employee string is some variable. So whenever I will call this function, how I will call this function? Employee is the class, and I am going to use a method from this class, employee dot from string. This is the class method from this class, and I am going to give it the ID, or the object or the instance of the employee string, first employee string. So John, Doe, or and 70,000. It will go towards this string, empty string over here. It will come over here, and here it will be splitted over the dash, over the hyphen, and the first will come to, and the John will come to the first, Doe will come to the last, and 70,000 it will come to the pay. And after that, we can return it to the first, last, and pay, and then it can be used inside the this class. And here this class, it prints the first employee, second employee, and the pay for that. So it means that this new employee, it will be added in the class. So this was one way to 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 add the employee in the class like this, and this is the second way to add the employees in the class. But for these employees, the input, the input method is different. To make the different input method, we have made a method or function like this, which takes the first name, last name, and pay as a hyphen, and separates them and puts them into the class, and stacks in the class. So we can do this for the 100 implies, 50 implies. So first, this method can be used for the 10 implies, and for the next 90 implies our input data is like this. So it's better that we can make the function like this and put the entries of these 90 method 90 employees or 90 instances using this class method into our class. So this is the way we can make our job, we can make our task simple. Is that okay? If we call outside the of the class, so its order will be like function. Sorry, Usman, I am going to look at your question. If we call outside the class, so its order will be like class dot function. Yes, if it is calling outside, it will be the class dot function, class dot function dot object. Yeah, I guess so for this. So next it comes the static methods. We have discussed the init methods, then we discussed the regular methods, then we discussed the class methods, and now we are going to discuss the static methods. Or before the first, we discussed the init functions for class, and then we discussed the regular functions for class, then we discussed the class method or class functions for class, and now we are going to discuss the static functions or static methods for the class. As I say again and again, for the for functions in the class in Python, we call them method. These are the init method, regular method, class method, and static methods. Static methods can neither modify class objects or class state. Static methods are primarily a way to namespace your methods. When you want to put some method in the when you have the method and you want to use it again and again, then what you simply do is that you put that method in the class. If there is a method and you have to use again and again, then what you do, you can just simply put it in the class and you can use that. Static method do not take any default arguments like regular method or class method. So they don't take any default argument. Just like here, the default argument is the self. For the init method, the first default argument is the self. For the regular method, the default argument is self. And for the class method, the default argument is CLS, and then the other arguments. So for the static methods, there are uh, there is no default argument. So here we want a function which prints the date, which prints whether it is a weekday or not. So we say that for company need a function which need to calculate that whether today is a weekday or not. So for that, all the things are the same. Here I have made one static method or static function to compute to check that whether today is a weekday or not. So I come to it a moment. Let's see that how we are going to use outside the class. So outside the class, we define the datetime module, datetime function. So this is the built-in module in the Python, and I give the datetime module dot date. I give it the date of 2026 and 26, the last yesterday, and I give it to the my date, and I give it is workday. So this is the workday is a function. So this is the decorator. Here is the decorator class method. Here is the decorator is the static method. This is the keyword, the static method. Here the decorator is the class method. Now I am using the static method because static method is not using the instance or any self or any class. So but it just need that it needs some argument, and the argument should be the daytime, the date of today or date of yesterday or date of tomorrow or date of any other day. So this date will come to this argument. This date will go towards the my date, and my date is work workday function will be called here, and this date through here to my date, it will go to this day, and it will check it, and it will check that day dot weekday is 5 or day dot weekday is 6. 5 is the Saturday, and 6 is the Sunday. Starting from Monday 0, Tuesday 1, Thursday 2, up to Friday, Saturday is 5, and the Sunday is 6. So if this date is 5 means Saturday, or 6, then it is the false. It's not the work day. It's a false. It's not a work day. Otherwise, if it is true, it's the work day. So if I check it for the yesterday was the Friday. Yesterday was Friday. So it give it true because yesterday was a work day. So this function, I use this function, a static function, to check that whether the 2026 was the weekday, was the work day. Yes, it was a work day. But what about today, 2026 27? It will show the false. No, today is not a work day. So it will show that this method will be used to check whether today or any date is a work day or not. Is that okay? So it's simple. The next concept is a little tricky and a little important. That's the inheritance. Okay. So inheritance is the most important thing, and that the Python is used for, or any object-oriented language is used for. What does it mean by the inheritance? Inheritance means that we have a big class, and we make the subclasses for that class. We take some functions from that big class and use those functions. That is called as an inheritance or the subclasses. We have one big class, and we use the properties of those class. That is called as an inheritance or subclasses. Inheritance allows us to inherit attributes and methods from the parent class. What does the inheritance mean? Inheritance allows us to inherit attributes and methods from the parent class. It's useful to create subclasses with all the functionalities of the parent class in the subclass. Inheritance is used to create the subclasses with all the functionalities from the parent class are in the subclasses. All the functionalities of the parent class, they are actually in the subclass. We can add new functionalities to the subclass or child class without affecting the parent class. If we want to make some new changes or new modifications, then we can make the new modification or changes in the child class or in the subclass without affecting the parent class. So this is the main concept of the inheritance. So if we talk about the same example, so before we have the employees in our class, but now we are going to segregate that. Or we have some other type of a class. We want to make another type of the employees, another type or subtype of the employees, that we are going to call them as a developer. We are going to call them as a developer. We have a software house and we have the employees, and in that company or in that software house we have some developer. So we are going to make a subclass for the developer. So is that okay? You got that? But we are going to do that. We are going to make a subclass for the developer from the employee class. So all the things are the same up to here, just like the init method, the regular methods. But here we are going to use we are going to make a subclass of the big class, of the parent class. So we are going to use the keyword class and the name of the class, and we are going to make it the developer, and developer should be deduced or should be made from the employee class, because whatever the developer is in the software house and in the company, it is the employer. First it's the employee and then it is the developer. So we are going to make a child class from the employee class, and just for the sake of understanding, we just make it pass, and we did not make any attribute to that class. So for the first, I am going to make the object or the instance developer1 or developer2. I am going to name them, and the suite, Ahmed, salary, and the test user and the salary, and I am going to make them print their email address. So I have print their email address. This is first email of the first developer and the second. And if I am going to access this developer using the developer class, here I am going to access the developer using the employee class. Here I am going to access the developer using the developer class. So it's the same. Uh, uh, then for the developer one email, and for the developer two the email, it comes the same. So it means that we can use we can access the developers from the subclass as well. We can access or make the properties change or access the developers from the subclass the same. Here it comes I have put a function that helps for the developer. What this developer is, this is developer is the subclass, and whenever this inheritance is used, how does it work? It is called as a method resolution order. Method resolution order. Whenever I will use the subclass, any method in the subclass or any attribute in the subclass, it will check it in the developer or in the subclass. If that attribute or method is found in the developer class or in the subclass, it will say okay, or it will process it. Otherwise, it will go next to the employee class and check it that whether that method or that attribute or that variable is in the employee class. It will say okay. But if some function or if some method or attribute is not in the developer class or employee class, then it will go towards the built-in object or the built-in class from which the Python is made. So first it will check first it will check the value, the method or it will check the method or the attribute in the developer class. Then it will check the employee class, or then it will check in the built-in object. For instance, if I am going to compute uh, the 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 area of a circle, pi r square, and I am going to use the value of the pi. So if I use the area of a circle and I did not declare the value of pi, the first it will check the value of pi in the developer class. If it's not in the developer class, it will check the value of pi 22 by 7 in the employee class. If it's not in the employee class, then it will go towards the built-in objects, and built-in objects of the Python. It will have the value of pi or the 22 by 7 in the built-in class of the Python. Then it will take 22 by 7 multiplied by the radius, and it will compute the area of the circle. So this is the way that whenever some method is needed or attribute is needed, it is checked in the developer class, the subclass. If it's not in the subclass, then it comes to the class, and it checks if it is not even in the class, then it comes to the built-in objects or built-in classes of the Python language. So this is a method resolution order or the function resolution order. So this is the way that this is the says that what methods are used in the employee class. In the employee class, we are using the init method. We are going to use the apply raise method, and we are going to use the full name method. Three methods are used in the our employee class, and then it shows that what are the attributes in the employee class. The employee class, it has attribute of number of employees. By default it's 0, and then raise amount is 1.04. So it says that this developer class, it is a subclass of the employee class, and the employee class has these three methods, and employee class has these two attributes. So is that okay? Have you got it? This developer class is the instance of it, is the subclass of the employee class. Now we are going to Okay, now we are going to customizing the subclasses. Here we are going to make some custom changing in the subclass. We say that for the salary raise or the raise amount, initially we said that the raise amount for the all employees will be the 4%, so 1.04, and then we made a change for to the 5% in the previous example. Now we say that for the developers, and we are going to give them a raise of 10%. We are going to increase their salary to the 10%. So now you can see that instead of previously we was using the past statement, now we are going to change this past statement with some raise amount, and we want to give the raise to the developers a 10%. So keeping in mind that developer is the subclass of the employee class, and we are going to give them, it has all the same properties as that of the other employees, but one extra thing is the raise amount. We are going to make the raise amount from 4% or 5% to 10%. So we change this attribute, this this variable or attribute from 4% to 10% for the inside the developer class. So what will happen? This is the developer 1, Tasveer Ahmed 50,000, developer 2, test user 60,000. So for the developer 1, I check it pay without raise amount. I did not use the raise amount. So initially the initial raise, it was for the developer 1, it was the pay was 50,000. Why? Because it called it print the pay function. The pay was this 50,000, and then I use the method apply raise, this apply raise, and for the developer 1, because for the developer 1 it comes from this class. So instead of using a raise amount of 4%, it will be used the raise amount of 10% for this raise. For apply raise, it will not come from here. This apply raise, it will come from here, because this instance developer is not the instance from the employee class. This developer is the instance, developer 1 is the instance from the developer class, and developer class says that the raise amount should be 4%. Instead of 4%, it should be 10%. So 10% will be multiplied with the salary, and this time the salary will be increased from 4% to 10% for the developers only. The salary will be increased from 4% to 10% for the developers only, because we have made the developer as a subclass, as a special class of the employee class, and we are going to give them more incentive from 4% salary increase to 10% salary increase. So we have changed the salary increase for the developers, and for that we apply that, and we check that the salary increase has come from 50,000 to 55,000. So this is a very good thing for the subclasses, that we can we can change the attribute for the subclasses. We can change the attribute for the subclasses without affecting the parent class. For the any other employee, the salary increase will be 4%, but for the developer class, the salary increase will be the 10%. Is that okay? Have you got that? Jamil says okay. Aja says okay. Because this is the important concept. This is extensively used in the deep learning. If you are going to use the deep learning, this subclasses or inheritance concept is extensively used for the deep learning. So okay, this is one more example, and in this example we are going to use we're going to before example we only use the attribute to change the attribute, but now we are going to initialize, we are going to introduce one new method in the subclass. This code is the same. This is the developer, and now we are going to use the one new method. Actually, what we are going to do, we are going to ask the developer that what the programming language he can do. Whether the developer can do the Python, whether the developer is good in Python or whether the developer is good in Java. So we have associated for each developer either the programming language Python, Java, or C++ or whatever. So for that we need to change the arguments of our function. Before we used only the first name, last name, salary, but now we need one more thing, and that is the language they are skilled, they are famous for, or they have the skill in what language. And we have to change the argument from three arguments to the four arguments. So the first three arguments are the same, the first name, last name, and the salary, but one extra argument is the language, which they can do the programming, the Python or the Java. So this way I am going to use I am going to declare the method for a subclass. So this is the init method, because I'm going every time I am going to give the instances. This is the init method. So first is the same self, first, last, pay, and now I have to put one more programming language, programming language. Before, you can say that for the parent class there was only self, first name, last name, pay, and that's it. But now for the subclass have one extra argument, that is the programming language. All other properties, they will be inherited from the parent class. Super dot, this is the keywords, and this is the practice that we need to follow. Underscore init. The first three methods are the same as in the parent class, or in the child class, or in the subclass. So we put then the arguments which are the same, the first, last, and the pay. But one new argument is the programming language. So self dot programming language is the programming language. So we are going to add one new argument, that is the programming language for the each developer. So we are going to use that as a new line, as a new statement over here, that the programming language associated for each instance, the programming language associated with the each instance, with the each developer. So how it will be implemented. So whenever I will this now here I am outside the class. Our class is up to here. Now I am outside of the class. I am going to instantiate the subclass. I am going to instantiate the subclass, or I am going to I am going to make an object of the subclass, and the subclass is developer. So developer, the first name is Tasveer, the last name Ahmad, then it comes the pay, and then it comes the programming language. So for the developer one, it will be in the database, it will be saved the first name Tasveer Ahmad 50,000 and the Python. And for the developer two, it will be saved the test user and the test, first name test, last name user, and the pay 60,000. And then the programming language will come here, and it will be associated for the user two, the programming language as a Java. So when I am going to print for the developer one the email, for developer one, now you can see that to print the email, it is using the parent class, because the email is not in the developer class. When I need to print the attribute email comes from the parent class, but the programming language, it comes from the developer class or the subclass. So with this inheritance, we can access the variables or methods from the parent class, or we can inherit the attributes or the method from the subclass or the child class. Here, now I am going to access that for the developer two, the email. The email comes from the parent class, and the programming language, it comes from the subclass or the child class. So it prints the Java, and then first it prints the email. So this is the way that we with the inheritance, we can add properties to the subclasses without changing the properties of the parent class. We can add more methods to the subclass without changing the methods of the parent class. Is that okay? Because this was the one most tricky thing and most needed for the when we use the deep learning or something like that. because our neural network is a class, and we customize it according to our need, according to our subclass. I will give you an example for that in the next slide. Oh, oh, I have two more slides, one more example. So this is customizing the subclasses. So let's one more interesting example. So in our previous example, we have the employee as a class, and then we have a subclass of developer, and now we have one other subclass, and that subclass belongs to the manager, because manager is also an employee. Before we have the developers, and they were inherited from the parent class employee. Now we have the managers, and they have also inherited from the employee class. But the properties of or the responsibilities of the developers and the managers, they are quite different. The 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 job description or the responsibilities of the developers and the managers, they are quite different. So here we see that how we deal this problem. Is that okay? So for the manager, so first we will need that we will need to initialize the subclass manager. So manager also will also have the first name and last name and pay, and then we give the one extra argument to the manager, and we call them manager of how many employees. How many employees work under that manager? How many employees work under that manager? One employee, two employees work under the manager, or 50 employees, 60 employees, they work under the manager. We call them the number of employees. If there is no employee, then it will say that the default argument is none. There is no employee. And the first three things are the same: the name of the manager, last name, and the pay of the manager. And then it comes the if there is self-implies, there is no employee, then it's okay. Then if there are already we have entered the implies, then it will tell how many implies. And also the manager have the authority that he can add the employee or he can remove the employee. So we have made these two functions specific to the class manager: add the employees and the remove employees. So and print the finally we have a function to print the number of employees. So let's start here. We say that for this is the developer one or instance one. For the developer one, name, first name, last name, salary, and the language. For the developer two, first name, last name, salary, and the language. Then we call the manager, and the name of manager is Sue Smith, and the salary is this, and then we call it developer one. That developer one, he works under the manager one. He works under the manager. The developer one, he works under the manager. And then I print the email of the manager. It prints the email of the manager. And then I add the one more employee under the manager. This is the instance variable. This is the class variable. This is the instance variable for the manager, and it has been derived from the MGR. It is related to this object is related to the class manager, and class manager has already one employee, the manager one, the developer one. Now we are giving the developer two under the manager one. So means that we add by default we add the first developer or first employee under the manager, and here we explicitly add the second employee or second developer under the manager. So now the manager has two employees. The first employee is the Tasvir Ahmad, and the second employee is the test user. So when we call the function from the manager, the print employees, the number of employees, it will print the first developer or first employee, and then it will print the second employee. These two employees, they work under the manager. And then the manager decided that he wants to remove the first developer. He wants to quit the first developer. So he called the function remove employee one, or remove employee, or remove implies the developer, and he wants to quit the developer. So now the if we print the print number of employees, it will be only remaining the second employee, the test user, and the first employee we have deliberately removed from the class database. So now our class database has only one developer and that, or one employee, that is the test user. And before that, before using the function remove, we had we had the two developers or two employees who are working under the manager. So this is the example that we have made one other we have made one other subclass manager which can deal the employees, developers or employees or etc. And it has some extra rights to add the employee or extra right to remove some employee. So this is the other example of the of the subclass or the class inheritance, because either it's developer or either it's manager, it anyhow is the employee, and it takes the properties from the employee. And if you want to check the salary of the employee, you can print the salary of the mgr underscore one dot salary, or the pay, it will print out the pay of the manager, or email or whatever you want, it will print it out. So for some specific properties, it take from the manager class, and from the basic properties, it will take from the employee class. Is that okay? Is this example is some understandable for the inheritance? I always like the inheritance in object-oriented language or Python, because in deep learning or convolutional neural networks, you extensively need the inheritance. So So in the Python, there are some functions which can say that if you want to check that whether it's true or not, is instance. For example, if I want to check that the manager one is an instance of the class manager, yes, it's the instance of the class manager, because manager, we declare it, the manager is from the class manager, so it brings out true. And if we want to check that whether the manager is an instance of the class employee, yes, it of course it's, because manager is an instance of the class manager, and the class manager is is a subclass of the employee. So it means that the manager one is also an instance of the class employee. So obviously the manager is the manager one is a manager, and the manager is also an employee. And if we want to check that the manager one is a instance of the developer, no, it's not the instance of developer, because uh, manager is a diff subclass and developer is a different subclass, and they have nothing to do with that, with each other. So that's why it print out false. So subclass, this is to check that whether a class is a subclass of the other class. So check whether developer is a subclass of employee class. Yeah, it's true. A developer is a subclass of the employee class, and the manager class is also a subclass of the employee class. Yes, it's true. But the manager is not a subclass of the developer class, so it prints false. So is some functions which tells us that whether a function is a subclass, or whether a class is a subclass or not, or whether a instance is a whether an object is an instance of a class or not, whether an object is an instance of a class or not. So then it comes finally the last slide, which I say that the deep learning is using extensively using the inheritance, uh, uh, the concept of inheritance when we declare the neural network. So here it's using the torch, the Pytorch, and the Pytorch, it's using the class neural networks, NN neural networks, and from the NN module, NN neural network module, we are going to create the LENet, the basic the LENet, which is used for the MNIST data set. Do you know the MNIST data set, to figure out the numbers, to classify the numbers from 0 to 9? It is a very famous neural network, LENet, which is used for the MNIST, or classifying the numbers from 0 to 9. It's this neural network has a two convolution layer and two fully corrected layers. So what I mean to say that again we are using the super, the LENet super, that it is going to take this LENet class. We use this LENet, declare LENet as a class, as a subclass from NN class. The big class, the parent class is the neural network, and subclass is the LENet. And LENet should take all the properties from that, from the parent class. But what the extra need is, we need is the convolution network one, convolution network two, and then we need the dropout layer and fully connected, and and by default the convolution 2D function, it is declared convolution 2D function, it has been defined and declared in the NN module. Similarly, the dropout, it has also been used and declared in the NN module, and the linear or fully connected function, it has also been declared in the NN module, but we are going to now associate with the LENet. We are going to use this method, and we are going to customize them according to our according to our according to our subclass. So here we are going to use the init method, and then we are going to use the regular method as a feed forward neural network, where we take the input and we apply the convolution and pooling, and then output of this, we take the input to the second layer, we apply the convolution and the pooling layer, and then we make it state, and then we apply the fully connected layer, which is a state. We make the output state, and then we apply the dropout layer, and finally we apply the fully connected layer 2, and then it shows, we use the softmax function to check whether the digit is to check the probability whether the digit is between 0 or 1. So this is the basic understanding that the classes, actually the 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 concept of Python as a classes, it is being used, the concept of Python as a classes is being used in the in the neural network or the deep learning. So this was my understanding or my emphasis, that we always use the classes. That's why I always emphasize on the classes, that classes are being used as a tool to play in the deep learning. So because we, for the neural networks, we always define them, we always declare them as a subclass of a big class and customize it according to our need. So this was all about that. So any question about it? I think the presentation has become too long. Any question from your side? Any question? Jamil says no. Okay. So all these stuff, it has been taken from the YouTube. I take the couple of tutorials on the YouTube, and then compile them according to the need, and then steer them so that it can be the basic or the baseline for the deep learning, and so that the people can use the concept from the Python for the deep learning. So if you have any feedback or any question, you can just send me on this email, or you can approach me by any way, whatever you like. So hopefully next tutorial I will come on the deep learning and say that some example from the LXNet or LENet, and I will try to explain that how the Python is being used for those, and how we can build the deep learning model using the Python or Pytorch or TensorFlow, etc. Is that okay? So I think, thank you so much. Thanks all of you. I am not going to take any more time from your side. Thank you so much. Thank you. Jazakallah. Bye bye.